Peacock, and
My name is Reginald Yenemy.
all right, and each of us is the organizer and founder of a group for non-believers. I started Black Non-Believers of Metro Orlando in January.
I started my group in January as well. January 12th to be exact, symbolically because of the earthquake that hit Haiti 2 years ago on that day.
Okay. And I started my group to also coincide with an event. It wasn't an earthquake, but it coincided with the National Day of Solidarity for Black Non-Believers.
What was that day?
It would have been the last Saturday or Sunday. I should know this. I'm embarrassed now. But it was in February, so it would have been that last, I guess, Sunday or Saturday in February.
Okay.
So that would have been the day.
Okay.
Right.
So this is a regular thing?
Yeah, the National Day. It hasn't been, I think it's only been around for 3 years, but it is an annual event. Donald Wright, someone who's based in, I think he's either Dallas or Houston. He's written a book. It's called Let My People Go. It's kind of a memoir. It's about his experience coming out as an atheist and leaving the church. And what he does, it's part memoir and it's part polemic. He also argues about how the church, the Black church specifically, has a lot of shortcomings, as you probably know. So I often credit Donald for giving me the inspiration to do the kind of work that I've started to do.
Okay. Very good.
Tell me about, I'm curious, you said that you wanted to start your group because of the earthquake. So this what year is this, 2010?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what was it about the earthquake that inspired you to start a group? So what's the connection?
The connection, the short story is the comments made by Pat Robertson.
And so you're talking about the evangelist.
Yes.
Right.
I was in...
Televangelist, I guess.
Yes, I was in Virginia at the American Logistics University as a soldier. I'm an officer in the U.S. Army, National Guard, and that's when the whole thing happened, and it impacted me for obvious reasons because I'm Haitian and I didn't know if people in my family were affected, whatever. But when Pat Robertson said what he said about Haitians making a deal with the devil, that really saddened me. You don't know about the comments?
Yeah.
And but it wasn't the fact, because I know he's an idiot.
Oh.
But what bothered me even more was that Haitians already believe things like that or believe the same story or something similar.
When you say the same story or something similar, are you saying that they also believe that the earthquake was a result of something that God wanted? Okay.
They speak in, some Haitians speak in terms of God doing a cleanup, like we're too, you name it, sinful, too whatever, and that God needed to press the reset button. All I know is flood, and so that's how they cope with it. It's a coping mechanism. It's not true by any means that are necessary, but to have Pat Robertson say that to an audience of, for example, persons who don't know anything about Haiti or Haitians, and they themselves are infected by religion, they kind of have that mindset towards me and Haitians, and I couldn't stomach that. So I'm trying my best to do something about it.
Okay. And when you say you're trying your best to do something about it, so you're not just, I guess, combating the kinds of negative things that Pat Robertson says. This would be churches, American Christianity.
All of the above. Like the earthquake was the catalyst, but I, as an atheist, as a Haitian man, as an American soldier, I wear different hats, whatever. I care, like I'm in the fight against the religion, because like it's, you know, I went to war based on 9/11 and it has religious implications. And so I know how those things can play out in people dying. So this is like not a joke to me. This is not some person making some random comments. You know, this is real people dying that we saw on television. Not because devils and gods were having a disagreement, but for me, if Haitians don't do the right things in the future, because there's going to be earthquakes again, we don't prepare the right way by using technology, science, you know, then we're going to be perpetually, you know, subject to being victims for no reason. And so if you don't believe in devils and ghouls, you're not going to take the proper steps, I think, to prepare for what is going to happen, which is earthquakes.
All right, so when you say Haitians, are you talking about like Haitians within the country of Haiti, Haitians in you know, in the diaspora? So
when I say Haitians, I think that's a good question. There's really two classes, like you mentioned. There's Haitians in Haiti and there's Haitians outside of Haiti. The Haitians outside of Haiti, you would think, have more exposure to different things, but even if they do, you know, it doesn't mean anything if it's not being, that effect is not being seen in Haiti. The Haitians are in Haiti are, you know, I'm concerned about them because skeptical material is not available to them because of different reasons. So when I was considering doing this group, I just saw, like, in my mind, a mountain of obstacles that we have to traverse that a fellow American atheist just won't have the obstacles. We're talking about illiteracy, lack of power. Even if there was such a thing as a Richard Dawkins in Creole, like, how do I present that information to that person? So
that's interesting. I know that you live in the United States, so do you think that what you just talked about in terms of the challenges that the Haitians face, particularly on the island, is different from what other black people face in the United States or in the Caribbean?
yes.
Because the reason why I asked that question, we know that the black community in the United States is hyper-religious, and the black community in the Caribbean, Jamaica, you know, Barbados, they're hyper-religious as well. So I was wondering, do you think that?
I think one of the main differences that come to mind is the fact that, unlike some of the other Caribbeans, we have our own, we've managed to sustain our own natural religion from Africa, which is voodoo, and it's been made to be bad by the Christians, and it wasn't until I came to the United States I found out it was because of voodoo that helped us become free, and everybody celebrates. Haiti has this great example of people overcoming oppression, and that's great, but it was because of voodoo. Not that I'm promoting voodoo as something better, right? But I gotta give props. But we have that African Americans, for example, don't have a secondary option that's prominent. Maybe you might have some Muslim, but you know. So that's the first thing that I can think of. The second thing is the language. We have Creole, which is not popular like the French component that we have, so that if there's material about building bridges or whatever the case is, you know, in English materials, you know, the Jamaicans, for example, they can plug into the American system and read. The Bahamians, they can read. The Trinidadians, they can read the English. They can see the YouTube of Richard Dawkins and so on and so forth.
Because they have some infrastructure that I guess Haiti doesn't have.
Just the language.
Just the language.
The material can be understood, so that if we're having a conversation, you can understand where I'm coming from.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that the believer will become a non-believer, but at least we can speak the same language. I can reference them to different things that they can see. The Haitian that maybe doesn't know how to read and just speaks colloquial Creole, I have to kind of reinvent that wheel and talk about concepts to them that they may not have considered or heard before. That's really one of the unique challenges that I think the African American counterparts, and maybe some of the other members of the Caribbean, don't really face, because they were colonized by English-speaking people.
So English-speaking. So so language plays a role, or it becomes its own barrier.
It is.
And so, in thinking about how you want to accomplish those things, like reaching out to Haitians to provide them with information to maybe translate Richard Dawkins' books into the Creole, how would you do it? I mean, is it like with radio? Because I know one way that, or at least what I've learned, that Haitians in the States and elsewhere communicate with Haitians on the island is radio. Is that accurate, or?
Right. When I was younger, like they used to take boom boxes and essentially record conversations on tape and mail it to their kinsmen, and they would listen to whatever messages. So the oral tradition is still strong, but with technology, even some of the average or poor Haitians now tend to have Facebook accounts.
Oh.
So I figured if you can jump on Facebook to check certain statuses, you can find Creole speaking, skepticism, any given topic that we think that is important, and they can be like, wow, that's a Haitian guy or white guy, doesn't matter, purple person speaking my language, Creole, and making me like, whoa, thinking about these topics. That would be great. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to basically put out materials that we can find now and perhaps in the future.
Okay. How do you think you would be received? Because if Haitians are like other black people in the States and the Caribbean, religious, how do you think you would be received? Because I know, in my experience, when I do talk to black people, and almost all of them are Christian. I'm like always the only atheist or whatever, or if they're not Christian, they're spiritual. The thing that I get if you bring up science is, and you've probably heard this before, well, God is beyond science. Man doesn't know everything. Or I guess the default thing for a lot of them to say, but it's in my heart. So I'm just curious.
I haven't done too many public type of things like we're doing right now, which is going to help both of us out, but it's not going to be very received with open arm. Actually, I went to like a National Haitian American Forum, and I kind of wanted to incorporate what I'm doing into that whole thing. The persons that were on the board, they were Haitian American politicians, whatever. Their godness was imbued into their language and into everything. So it's a steep challenge. So it's not going to be received very well. Like, we have a strong slave tradition that's still alive today. By that I mean it's authoritarian. You know, that's why God works in the black community, because you have that master and slave, shepherd-sheep relationship, which they understand very well. So they can kind of just substitute the names in. So like for me to come and say, no, I'm challenging, triggers that the devil mentality, because the Satan in the Bible is a challenger. Mm-hmm. I'm a challenger. I'm telling him that no.
What you just said makes me think of something that I heard someone else say about one of kind of the ironies of Christianity as it relates to the slave trade, right? That Christianity was used in part to make slaves docile, to follow their masters, but we do know as well that eventually, let's say in the United States anyway, I think in other countries as well, that slaves were able to appropriate Christianity and somehow make it work for them.
Because of the Moses story.
Yeah, and make it work for them. But as you just said, that the mind is still enslaved. Even if the body, it has freedom, but the mind is still enslaved.
The mind is indeed enslaved. Everybody, black, white, purple, yellow, needs to read in my opinion, The Miseducation of the Negro.
Carter G. Woodson.
Carter G. Woodson. I was a slave.
Some people say they say he's a free thinker. Lane Locke, Carter G. Woodson.
Carter G. Woodson, Frederick Douglass,
Zora Neale Hurston,
Butterfly McQueen. So here we are saying these black names, but how many Haitians can we name amongst them? This is what this whole thing is all about. everybody can understand, you know, the circumstances of those people and the proud history and everything, but they don't want to talk about the religious aspect, how it affects us back then and now, and that's why we're here to like promote skepticism, talk about back then, now, read, so that the people can be indeed mentally free. I'm here to tell them that you are still a slave.
Well, I was wondering what you said about like Haiti and the fact that, well, Haitians, as I understand it, and I'm not Haitian, but you all have a different, historically speaking, you all have like a different self-conception of freedom because you all were the first black free republic in the world. I think Haiti was, and so that's when not only did Haiti get its freedom, it's still, as you know, it's still practiced African religions. So do people, you know how people attribute Christianity to the strength of America? Do people in Haiti attribute, you know, what's what I want to say? It's freedom, the emancipation that that Haiti had from France to African gods. Do people ever say anything like that? You know what I'm talking about? Like,
I understand. Like they, you know, like the Christians still credit all the time, right? So they think that America is a Christian nation. So do Haitians use the vote?
God has blessed us.
Right. No, because even though we had the Great Revolt, we're known for being impoverished. So even if we did a great thing back then, because of our current state of affairs, you can't be giving praise to Ezuli or whatever the name of the current spirits are because of the current state of affairs. So no, actually the Christians have done a successful job with a propaganda war to make us think that the African religion, Vodou, is evil. That's why even within my own family, I found out not till recently that my auntie and my uncle practice Vodou, and it's kind of like we were told that it was the epitome of evil. So you're not going to have pride within your own group that, you know, you're being told that, you know, your cousin, your mom is evil. So no, it's not like that in Haiti. That's part of the slave mentality that we have to overthrow. I mean, imagine I had to come to the United States just to find out about myself. Yes, I came to the U.S. and I found out that it was because of Vodou that we became a free republic, which is what Pat Robertson was alluding to. You would think that's something that we should be celebrating, but you're not waving that flag because how are you going to give credit to that evil thing? You see, so we were brainwashed by the Christians to think that which freedom was evil. And that makes perfect sense because the Christians were benefiting from the evil institution of slavery, which is also in the Bible, as you know. So the remnants of those things are still within us. That's why they're not going to be proud. Nobody still today comes out and says, I practice voodoo freedom. That's unheard of. You're putting yourself at risk.
You're saying that's unheard of in the States, or it's unheard of in Haiti?
Even in Haiti, I'm telling you, like, I mean, it's done. It's the biggest taboo, it's the white elephant in the room. I'm telling you, you can go to Haiti, and not everybody, a lot of people know about it, it's this whispering thing, but it's still taboo even in Haiti.
Is it like that all across Haiti in urban and rural areas?
More the rural areas. I'm a city guy, so like probably in the rural, Port-au-Prince. But like probably in the rural areas, it's a little bit more open or whatever. But I mean, it's still done in the city. But overall, I think Vodou has like, I have to fact check, is just not recognized as a state religion in Haiti. We're talking about some real backward stuff, man. Even though it was the thing that helped us free, that everybody, even the Christians, recognize that. So.
Right. Well, let me ask you this: since you do have an international background that I don't have, another thing that I have faced and I've had to like confront is people who think, well, if you're an atheist, then that means you are culturally white. Somehow you lose your blackness because you're an atheist. Have you not heard that?
I've not been told that, but I mean, like, I can see why they think so. We're in a propaganda war. Within the atheist community, what seems like the case is that blacks are religious, and there's a lot of truth to that. Just like we can talk about the Dawkinses, the Sam Harrises, and the Christopher Hitchens of the world, we need black equivalents. And it's not that there aren't known, it's just that especially back in the days, it was keeping on the low. You know, it's like homosexual times 10. You know, so we need to resurrect those people and say Frederick Douglass was a free thinker. Even Malcolm X might have lost some faith at some times. If we can verify,
that's me right there.
that's fine. Malcolm X is my hero. But I'm just saying that if there was some credible evidence behind that, our job is to say no. X and Y and Z were thinking along this path, or they were outright atheists, and we need to say, you know what, these people need to get their just due, and not just blacks. Like, I don't want it to become segregated like everything else. Like, if we as atheists see what's going on in the population at large, let's not follow the path and start to segregate for undue reasons. My group happens to be Haitian free thinkers. Your group is black non-believers. Like I told you,
everybody's welcome, everybody's invited.
Everybody's welcome, everybody's invited. And if I tell people, it's because the tagline was done on purpose to let Haitians know that such a thing actually exists.
Similar, I mean, if I do have an agenda, it's very similar to what you just said, and that the reason why I use black is to let people know that we do exist, because not only is it hard, I bet for like black people to imagine an atheist, I have found that it's even hard for white atheists to imagine a black atheist. Not to say that they can imagine a black person who can be atheist, but they don't see them and they never interact with them.
Propaganda wars. When Pat Robertson said what he said, he was feeding bad information to the hundreds of millions of Christians who don't know no better. So when those Christians meet me for the first time as Haitian, they're going to ask those stereotypical questions that people ask when they're not familiar with any given group. And that's ignorance. And my job is to confirm or deny that ignorance. And of course, in my case, yes, I'm Haitian, I'm American, I'm atheist. You know, touch me, feel me, eat with me. No, I'm willing to do that work because it's important. It really is.
You mentioned Malcolm X, who is one of my personal heroes, and one thing that I've told people, and I told somebody like in another interview, they asked like, when did it start? And I know for some people it was they did the science project and they realized that Noah's Ark is scientifically impossible, and it's like, wait a minute, what I'm reading in the Bible just doesn't square with science. But in my particular case, it actually started after I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And people, I know some people, it causes them to hear that, their eyebrows raise and they think, but that is when after I read that book and knowing that it was about a black Muslim, started me to question Christianity. So that's when the seed of doubt was first planted. It was after I read that book, and I started wondering, how come I've never met a Muslim before? How come I don't, and why is it that so many black people are Christians? And if what he is saying is true, then why do black people continue to be Christians?
A Muslim had a black, I was in middle school when I met my first Muslim. He was Haitian, a peer of mine, after refusing Easter eggs from a Jewish teacher. It's a true story. I mean, there's a lot of subtext in that sentence alone. I thought the world was either Christian or
Jehovah's Witness.
or I didn't know about that, or voodoo. I thought that was it.
Oh.
I didn't know about what a Jew was until around that time in middle school. So, yeah. So, my friend Luigi told me basically like, and we saw the movie Malcolm X. He's like, why are you worshiping that white man? And of course, the movie Malcolm X reinforced that. And how clear is that? Like Malcolm said it straight up and down. Like, you know, they brought us from Africa, put us into slavery. Like, so what are you doing? It was that simple. It was brisk, sublimely simple. And I didn't know how to answer that, so I started to ask people around. And so I can definitely agree that Islam had, and I was considering becoming a Muslim because I thought that was the black man's religion.
When you say, so were you talking about like Nation of Islam or Sunni Muslim?
At the time, Luigi was a basically a 5%.
5%.
You know,
5%.
people who are in the hip hop movement,
The
that every
offshoot. It was an offshoot of the Nation of Islam.
right, you know, based on Noble Drew Ali's teachings and all that. I mean, I learned about that later on. Now I know the difference. But NOI, you know, I did my tour of faith. You know, when I went to different people's churches and mosques, you know, I went to an NOI Nation of Islam mosque, and I learned a little bit about them. It's not for me. I was not supposed to be a believer. I'm an atheist.
Well, in my case, I was exposed to Islam. I didn't actually go to like a temple or anything, but I knew Muslims. I'm 5% of Sunni Muslims, and even former black male Christians who converted to Islam. And I was exposed to people of other faiths. This was in college as well. But there was always a part of me that, for whatever reason, held on to Christianity, because when I was younger, I wouldn't say because of my childhood, I actually, if I were to be honest, the church that I attended was a good church. I didn't really have like a bad experience. And I think because I didn't have a bad experience as a boy, I was like, well, that church is, I would say, well, that church is bad. So, 'cause I know that there are things such as good churches. And so it took a long time for me to, I guess, to like just let go, to relinquish it. Even though I still had doubts, and I would even tell people that I was spiritual, I would, or even say loosely Christian, you know, because I stopped going to church, because after a while, when you get older, you realize, for not all churches, but a lot of churches, it's really about enriching the pastor, so he can have the Mercedes and the house with the waterfall and so forth. So
I think what you just said and done, I did in my own way. I call that customization. You were just customizing, you know, your reality to fit you, so that you can, and you put a label on it. I went from, I became once I heard the term free thinker, I named myself a free thinker, never an agnostic. Atheist, it repulsed me because, you know, I didn't want to give up the faith, because it was a loyalty issue between me and God at the time. But I totally understand, you know, exactly what you went through. But I wanted to say that after I read the Bible, that was the standard. And so I couldn't call myself a Christian. I tried to walk as Jesus did, and I knew that I couldn't do it. I didn't want to do it. It was either too difficult or too against my nature or impractical. So I say, in my opinion, I've rarely met Christians, because if you met real Christians, they'll be homeless, they'll be in jail. Yeah.
well, what would you say was some of the hardest things that you had to grapple with once you said to yourself, I'm an atheist, this is what I am? What were, just personally, I mean, beyond meeting someone who just does not understand, but was there something, did you ever have to like go through a period of introspection? Well, let me tell you what I'm talking about. It was one thing that I guess I did like about Christianity, the idea that if you could die, you go to heaven, and be with people who died before you, and y'all get back together and have a little family reunion. I remember for a while I became like depressed, because I was thinking, God, I'm not going to see my grandfather and my grandmother. And I became very, very depressed, because I was like, well, that's not going to happen. And it's kind of something, I guess, I'm not saying I was looking forward toward a death, but it's nice to, I guess, to imagine that something like that can happen.
To answer the question, I think my biggest thing was, how am I going to meet women?
Oh, okay.
Let me look. My wife is back there, and that's my daughter. You guys hear the baby in the background. She played a big part in me doing everything I'm doing right now, essentially, because I committed social suicide in August of 2009 when I posted on Facebook publicly that I attended the Flash meeting. She was the only person who showed any kind of interest to what that is. That was my first concern about women. Now, my family had an inkling that I was being different, because I came back from Iraq, because I started reading the Bible when I was deployed in Iraq, and I was on fire, because like I realized how important these beliefs can act on reality. So my depression stage or whatever was the realization that I had a great epiphany that was so urgent that it shook people. It would, if I didn't present the right way, it would push people away from me. So I'm ostracizing myself from women, from friends, whatever. So I was literally kind of feeling by myself, except for the fact that I went to the right, except for the fact that I met with the Flash folks, so that everything that I was hearing from atheist experience and to the different sources, the books I was digesting, was not by myself. I had other people. It's just that you felt lonely. And how was I going to meet a female who a lot of them were religious, and I wasn't going to lie to them? And how's that going to work? So those are the kind of things that I felt. And thank goodness that, I met her. She's since accepted that she herself is an atheist. And so we got married. So that's cool. Now I can more or less be comfortable in my skin. And I want to give that comfort to other people. So.
Another 30 minutes, right?
Okay. Well, I'm loving it. So it's up to you. We met our time deadline now, and I don't know if you want to take questions from the audience. It's up to you.
Are there questions from the audience?
How do you feel about raising your daughter in this society where, she's going to be perceived, because, like, we have children ourselves, younger children. They're not as young as her, obviously, but they don't tell people they're atheists, although they are. They want to. Yeah, they want to, but they're too afraid. I mean, how would you address your daughter as well, going to school and being with her peers, and if you have got such as an atheist, are you afraid that she's going to be ostracized?
We have another daughter, Jade, who's 7, and we've had conversations. She said one time that she's a believer, and another time she's not. I think I give them, like, whatever, we discuss it openly, like, what do you think about things? This is what I think about things, I'm never gonna, on purpose, at least I don't want to, coerce her to believe whatever I believe and vice versa. So, we always talk about evidence though at the house. Like, do you have evidence for that? Like, were you agreeing today? Were you good at school? She says, yes. I said, well, let me see the evidence. So that's what I actively push, so that if they say, well, Daddy, I think there was a God. Really? You have any evidence? I have a feeling in my heart. She knows that that's not good enough. So that's the only about proselytizing that I do, if any.
Yeah, our children were allowed to make the choices. They went to church for a while because they wanted to, but also homeschooled, so they were more free thinkers instead of being in a school system where they're directed a certain way. So they made their own choices, and I think they became atheists more outward about it than before we did. Yeah, they basically started asking questions that.
I think. I don't really have a lot of evidence. It's going to be anecdotal information. I don't have any like empirical evidence, but I think like for younger people who are coming up and developing, they are in an environment now where they have the kind of critical thinking skills that we didn't have, in part because of things that have happened, like before they were born and stuff like that. So where they would begin to question, like, well, I told you about like this Noah's Ark. Some of them are pretty smart. This could not have happened. The kangaroos. How did the kangaroos get there? So I think younger people now, and there's some like polls to back this up. They're not as religious as I guess I was and my parents are, and not to say that they won't be religious. And also there are polls that show that the number of atheists it's a growing number, and I think that's in part to people like coming out of the closet, so to speak, and also in part because there are younger people who they're smart enough to know that the Quran, the Bible, so they're made up.
You also have more access to media, so they can interact with other people, different backgrounds.
And what she said, and what you said is I think is good, and what she said was important to me because like they have access to media, And going back to the Haitian freethinkers flag, imagine the kids in Haiti. Most of the education in Haiti is paid for, so you have to pay for it, right? And a lot of it's provided by.
You said pay for it, so it's not like that what
It's
we
not free,
have,
it's
like
not
where we
free.
have a tax, and the tax pays for the school.
Right. You have to pay for your education. So if you don't have the money, you don't go to school a lot of times. And finally, a lot of the better education is provided by religious sources.
Yeah,
Ergo-
do they still have a lot of missionaries coming to Haiti
Yes.
and trying to teach all the kids?
Our group had a run-in with a group called One Hope.
In Haiti?
No, one of the members, because our group is primarily on Facebook, that's where we operate. One of the members posted a video about this group called One Hope Ministries, who made a video to proliferate their material to Haitian kids. And I saw it as buffoonery. So I kind of called them and I set up a meeting and I went to go and say, listen, you're misrepresenting the story of the same thing about the voodoo. They call us basically evil, make a long story short. Because in the Christian eyes, if you're not Christian, you're evil.
What's more evil, voodoo or atheism?
To them, it's probably the same.
It's equality?
So we had a run-in with them, and in the eyes of One Hope, this position that they, to me, again took is that these kids need Jesus more than anything else. And when you don't have a strong state that's respected, right, then these people can come and they can drop their leaflets to little kids, because mind you, their first priorities of survival is not being met. So anybody's giving a piece of bread and this pamphlet.
You put one and one together and they think that there's a correlation between it.
The poorer you are, the harder it's got to be to become an atheist. Because basically you're thinking about food and your basic needs.
Right, and not only that, but it's access to the information. So we're fighting what I call propaganda wars. And I basically asked the lady, I said, so excuse me, if I came to your home, United States, whatever, and I was passing out pamphlets about name whatever philosophy you don't like, would you like some stranger talking to your child? Of course she's gonna say no. But so I said, so why do you think it's okay to come speak to the Haitian kid? It's because they don't have respect for us.
That's what they do over here though with a lot of the kids. Most of the social groups are church-oriented, homeschool groups that we do. They're all church-oriented, so you don't get to go in unless you listen to the beliefs. They talk about the beliefs. They have activities for kids to kind of draw them in early to make them good Christians as children, so they grow up to be, adult Christians. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's fairly effective.
So
What do you think? This is this discussion I've had with other organizers of like Black freethinker groups, and that's kind of, I guess, when to be adversarial and aggressive. You know what I mean by that? Because I know Kim Ville, she does the Black Freethinker Show, and she has, and I don't want to misrepresent her, but this is what I've heard her say, because I haven't listened to all the shows, but I've heard her say this several times, that she's of the strong opinion that, at least within the Black freethinker community, it actually does us a disservice to be adversarial and aggressive with Black Christians, because we sort of feed into the stereotype that they already have, that being hostile, being the devil, and so forth. And her attitude is one, she's not the only one, but I just mentioned her because she's somebody very active in the community. Her attitude is one that you should supply the information and have a conversation and converse, versus as some atheists do, and sometimes they justify doing this versus being aggressive, marches, and so you know what I mean. I mean, what's your attitude on that?
My attitude is that I'm able to, and I'm willing to be all of the above. I'm willing to hug her, and I'm willing to punch him in the mouth, as long as it accomplishes the goal. If I knew, because some people need to be told, excuse me, no, I'm so sorry, you are stupid, sir. You are stupid, ma'am. You are, no, listen, you have to understand, people, you talked about the depression. I was in a traumatic state.
Yeah.
you have the Haitian earthquake, people seeing heads busted and people bleeding, missing limbs, right? Then I say, listen, read the Bible where it says, Yahweh said to kill men, women, and children. This is what it looks like. Is this not disgusting beyond measure? This is the reality that we're talking about. I don't have time to hug and kiss everybody. We have Iran that's supposedly building nuclear weapons. We have the state of Israel who has nuclear weapons. We have Christians who are expecting the Messiah to come. We have crazy people in the world, and they're willing, to do something about it. Okay? This is not games. This is not games. We're not having conversations because we don't have anything better to do with our times. This is serious business. And so for some people, the Pat Robertsons, the John Hagees of the world, the William Lane Craigs of the world, the Dinesh D'Souza's of the world, they need to be told that they smell and they need to go away. Now, for the average Joe who doesn't know nothing about nothing.
Well, I know you mentioned them and they're high profile people, and I have to agree with you that the people, they do need to be challenged. But again, bring it back to like the black community, hyper-religious, that God, walk by faith. So would you say the T.D. Jakes of the world need?
Each person you have you measure that person. Is that person kind? Are they just misinformed? Like, I'm willing to be kind, but I want to be effective. The T.D. Jakes of the world, I'll look at him. I want him to respect me as a formidable opponent. You see, so he's not going to come to me with your random lolly. I'm like, listen, go back to school and come back, because what you just said is so. Are you serious? How old are you? Like, really? And some people are willing to like listen, like, oh my gosh, like they have an honest curiosity, you see? Okay, then we can talk nice and kind and all that, but at the end of the day, just know that you need to check your position one more time, because what I'm saying is actually factual. You can check what I'm saying, it's tangible. Other people, you shouldn't waste your time because they're like the Eddie Longs of the world, like the Preful Dolls of the world. They're doing actual harm to the community by taking their resources. I would tell
in addition to abusing young people.
Abusing them.
Allegedly.
Right. This is your enemy. This is your enemy. Work on that and come back to me. What is he going to say? That everything I say is factual. That's why Malcolm X is my hero. People can say whatever they want to say about him, but his stuff was on point, and you can see it. And people would accuse him of being a hate monger. What? The question was what he said true or not?
Substance of it.
That's it. It's going to hurt people's feelings. I understand that. But, I mean, I don't have time to hug everybody. So I think there's a time and place for everything. And it is what it is. I mean, we're known to be delinquents anyway. I'm not saying you promote that. I'm not going to say, I don't think atheists will ever go smash cars, burn whatever. I mean, we don't have time for that. But, I mean, like, as far as being just accurate, but yet firm, I think there's a place for that.
Well, this is a question that comes up from time to time, and is when you talk to black Christians who, let's say, I'm not trying to lump them all into one category, who are somewhat humanitarian, and what they do is they say, well, you name somebody who's an atheist who's like a Martin Luther King Jr. and or say Mary McLeod Bethune, right? And then they say, when you can do that, then we can talk.
Okay.
And so where I'm going with that is, and this is what I have thought about as well. I sometimes think, and I think it's a fair argument, they bring up that the social justice component is lacking. And that may have something to do with us not having the same resources that they have. See what I'm saying? The ability to galvanize the church and its money and all its resources to be advocates of people who are downtrodden and so forth. And not to say that we can't do that, but you follow me when you mentioned Martin Luther King Jr. Even though a lot of things that were secular. He was a Christian person, but his goals were secular. ultimately they were secular goals. But you follow that line?
I understand. I mean, like, once again, the first thing, like, my group is to raise the profile of persons who've done great things. Maybe there's a secular version of Martin Luther King that they may not be aware of. That's the first thing. The second thing is, like you said, resources. Do we have them or do we not have them? It depends on what we're talking about. And if a person that happens to be Christian did a wonderful thing, we'll give them credit. It may not be consistent with what the Bible says, because from our perspective, there's very few Christians, including Martin Luther King. What did Jesus say versus what did Martin say? What did Yahweh say versus what? Martin Luther King is superbly better than Yahweh. It's not a contest. Martin Luther King was either on par or better than Jesus, because he died for us. Like, I can relate to Martin. Jesus may not have even existed. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I separate the religion and go straight to the facts.
Right. Just looking at the person.
Just looking at the person. You're either a good person or you're a bad person. You may be atheist and be bad. You may be religious and be bad. But I mean, like, let's talk about the issues. And if they want to say that, oh, this person happened to be Christian and done some wonderful things, then bravo. And I can tell you many Christians who've done horrible things. And sometimes it's because of their religion, sometimes not. I mean, it means nothing. It really doesn't. I know my Bible very well. It needs to be taught so that more atheists can be made. And besides that, we can talk about different topics such as, you name it. That's really where I come from with that. So it's a non-factor. He just happens to be a great man, very popular. But Malcolm X, to me, like, that's the standard. That's the gold standard. I mean, we can go on forever, but I guess we can stop there. It's up to you.
All right. Well, I don't know, but I can't think of any other questions, John. I'm sure there are lots of questions that need to be answered, but I can't really.
I just ask you one more. I mean,
Yes.
I came from a family that wasn't really very religious, so it was very easy for me to become an atheist. I didn't have any, even though at school I was ingrained a little bit. But how hard it was for you guys to break it up to come.
I go, well, again, going back to what I said earlier, because of my childhood, I saw nothing wrong with Christianity because of the exemplars that I had in my life, including family members. I don't want people to think that we were puritanical, because we weren't, and I don't want people to think that the church or churches, there were more than one that I attended, that they didn't have any scandals, but they did. But when you think about it's just doing it like kind of like weighing all the bad things versus the good things, in my mind, the good things had more weight. And the church was really a family, and it was not a hate-filled church or anything like that. I think what happened to me was, again, going back to what I said earlier, is I went from a small town to a big city, and then seeing even a greater diversity of churches, religions, synagogues, and temples, and meet people from all walks of life. And just on my own, having to, like, again, going back to the facts and stuff like that, and just being logical, having to say, well, and I had a professor, he was a black professor who was an atheist. He was having to listen to him, and they say, it's like, you know, these things do not square. They're not accurate. It's not logical. And so I didn't immediately, like, rebuff him on my own for several years because I couldn't give it up. I read and just lived life, and I finally, it was one of those things where I was like, you know, I can't do the mental gymnastics anymore. I just can't do it, you know.
I think a lot of atheists, I mean, I don't want to be an elitist or anything, but you have to be a logical thinker to end up being an atheist.
Well, my story, JP, is that my family was, like a lot of Haitian families, just Catholic by default, by programming. came to the United States, my mother started to go to Protestant places because it was just like accessible, and I don't think she really knew the difference or cared too much about it. You know, Jesus was Jesus, whatever. And so me, like, I kind of noticed certain things, but I didn't pay attention to it. I remember different things coming up. My logical thing was innate, and my alarm would go off, but then you like kind of ignore it, so to speak. My moment was when in 2003 when I was deployed in Iraq, thinking that I was going to die, and I was Christian by default, by association. No, actually, I did say the magic words. I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior, and the whole thing around 17 years old. And I knew, I felt I was going to die. I wanted to find out what's going to happen after I get into heaven. I want to know that after, you know, what do you do all day, 24/7, you know? So, I mean, I knew I was going, but I like, okay, well, you know what? I felt guilty because I read, I just tried to read Richard Wright's book, Native Sons, Faith. But I've done so many, I've read the Da Vinci Code. I'm like, you know what?
He's an atheist, but you're right. Atheist.
Roger that. And my thing was like, wow, you know, I've read all these books, but I'm supposed to be a Christian. Why don't I give God some time, finally, you know? So this is the important thing. Kids, listen up. I formatted my hard drive. I said these words. I erased everything I've been told about the Bible. I'm starting afresh from Genesis to, in my case, I started in Isaiah. Let me read for myself. I'm a literate person. I started reading, and my life changed right there. And I stopped in Isaiah, went to speak to my pastor and say, basically, like, WTF, what's going on here, you know, give me some explanation. He didn't know as much as I thought he should know. So, again, I said, wait, I can use the internet, I can ask questions, and I still got baptized after that fact because I couldn't let it go. I customized my God, my situation to me, and in 2009, I couldn't do it anymore. I went to the flash meeting and I said, you know what? I don't see what's wrong if I say that I'm being honest to myself, that I couldn't do it anymore. Like, why would God punish me for being honest? I didn't want to lie to God. God was a good thing that I created in my mind. So I said, you know, I suspend my thoughts, and I think that's what I'm an atheist. That describes me. Once you understand the definition, I say, yeah, that's what I am. And so that's the short version of what happened to me.
I was raised in a Roman Catholic church, and I find that even among different churches, that the belief system and the interpretation of the Bible is totally different. My mom once took me as an adult to a Pentecostal church in a service, and I tried to leave. They actually prevented me from leaving. They told me I could not go to the services there. They were speaking in tongues. I was extremely uncomfortable. And all I could think of is, cult, get the hell out of here. You know? And I just felt so bad, you know. But I don't know.
It's
My sister, I came out to her, and my sister, she gave me like the weirdest look. She was like, but you went to church one night. She was like, and she was thinking like, because I've always been a nerd, and I wanted to go somebody to read up on stuff, and I guess for her, she's like, well, you know, she's like, she didn't think that. And I guess eventually, like, well, I can see it. I can see it, but for a while, she was like, you know, you were a faithful churchgoer, you know, and it's come to this because she's a believer. I think I don't know anyone else in my family who's all the women, and I think in the black community, you just won't find a lot of black women who are like non-believers, right? I think there's some guys. I've had a discussion with some guys, but a lot of guys they kind of like they just go with it. But they like Donald Wright says the same thing in his book about they know what the pastor's about. They already know the game.
Right.
Game knows game, right?
Game recognize game.
Game knows game.
And you know what? Like, I think for the women, they're key to so many things because of their naturally endowed gifts. If you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's so easy. I think if I was a female, I would be in jail. I would burn the book. That book. Imagine the whole sex is blamed for the fall of man. The sexist statements in the book, there are clear as day. There's no reason why, if you're a female, you should be dealing with that book. Just like blacks and Christians should be oxymoronic terms. But, you know, because of great propaganda, they are able to survive and adapt because they customize themselves. People who call themselves Christians don't live like Jesus. No Jew today that I know of sacrificed animals because nobody really believes it. It's just a club. It's an emotional club.
Yeah, we found that with the kids, they teach them in the school system, they read biblical stories, but it's at the direction, I mean, they go through a homeschool, they're homeschooled, but they go through a public curriculum that provides it. And they teach them biblical stories, but it's about values, teaching children, you know, stories about, you know, taking care of your fellow person or to be strong and, you know, stand up for yourself or whatever. And that's why I felt comfortable enough with my children to go to church. But, you know, when they start throwing that the children have no power, that there's a God above them that tells them what to do, and they're supposed to give up all their, you know, direction and the free will, yeah, and follow a God, you know, instead of making decisions for themselves. Now that I can't really, you know, agree with.
Right. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I can discuss the positive things about the religion that I know the most about too. You know, I'll give you credit where credit is due. I don't have no problem with that. But overall, I mean, we have much bigger fish to fry. We have much work, whether it's in the Haitian community, white community, Hispanic, black, it doesn't matter. There's real things that we need to deal with that these things don't help us solve. So.
One thing that's come up, I don't think that, I'm not saying that we are speaking everybody in the free thinking community, that we really like critiqued, done like a self-critique, and this I guess is my opinion. It's like what some people call scientism.
What is that?
Well, basically, there's this difference to science. A lot of people think that, I mean, there's some truth there for a lot of people, is that they hold up science and they point to science as well. That's where all the answers
Science is
are.
religion.
Yeah, so, I mean, he said it better than I did. It was science becomes a religion, for lack of a better way to express myself. And the reason why I find that problematic is because when you hear people say sometimes, like, and this has come up with me, like, well, don't you know that science doesn't recognize race? I do understand that. But
Science
that
doesn't recognize what?
race.
Race.
There's no, yeah. So I do understand that. And they'll say, but the problem is, if you keep deferring to science, then do you ignore these other things that come about as a result? I mentioned this race as one, but like gender issues and stuff like that there's an inherent bias even with what people call scientism. You follow me?
I would say that when I discuss certain things with this last Christian I talked with on this blog talk radio show that we try to do, it's again, I call it war propaganda. They're trying to define certain terms. It's like a battlefield of the words, you know, scientism, ism, voodooism. Whoa, like, I make them work for it. You will define that term. If I disagree with it, I'll tell you I disagree with it. What are you talking about? For some people, these things are real problems. For me, it's not. To me, science is a method. It's a tool. The end. Some people might worship it. Einstein I supposedly said beautiful words about how science does this. Dawkins speaking in poetic terms about science. That's their opinion. That's fine. That's a beautiful thing. Science is a tool, and skeptics and free thinkers refer to it a lot as a way to proving things right or wrong to the best of our ability. It doesn't have to be more than that. For some people, it might become a little bit more of a fetish. I can't really control that. It could be beautiful. Some science, I mean, it's amazing. So. And
do you have the same kind of, I guess, attitude or way of looking at what we call like nomenclature issue of atheist, skeptic, Gnostic, atheist? I know that comes up, and I'm at the point where I roll my eyes because I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't know, for some people, and some people they so buy into it, and they're just really, like, in my opinion, like this very narrow and rigid definitions,
It's
and it's no flexibility. That,
Right.
that if you're an atheist, then you can also be a secular humanist. I mean, you could be both those things, right?
Yeah,
And I don't know. I mean that comes up, and I guess in my early days when it was interesting, but after a while, I'm like, why are people still having these arguments?
It's easy because like what happens is that human beings, they want to categorize you so that they can feel better. Like you're a black man, you're hostile, you're bald. Everybody's trying to like guesstimate so that they can feel better, and like, it's a human thing. I accept it for what it is.
Most Christian friends always ask us what church you go to see if we belong to the group right off the bat.
Yes,
Mhm.
they want to categorize you, and that's because it's a human thing. For me, like, first of all, I tell that person, I define myself. Thank you very much. I define myself. When we use the terms, if we're having different views on what a term means as I use it, we'll talk that, but don't define me. That's one thing I try to make clear to them. But besides that, to me, for some people it's more important than others. For me, if people have tried to call me an agnostic so that they don't like the atheist word or whatever, I'm an atheist. I know what that means. That defines me best. But if that makes you feel better, then that's fine. It annoys me, but I define myself. For me, it's all a matter of knowing the definition and to see if it applies to you.
And I don't get bothered with like if you want to be a secular humanist or not. You can. And it doesn't bother me, but it's never bothered me the labels. If you want to be a Gnostic atheist, agnostic atheist, and I don't even know all the terms, but it's never bothered me. And I'm not sure why it bothers other
Who
people.
came up with those?
I don't know, but there's a list. I didn't know there were. I
No.
told someone that came up with a
Until I
book.
saw it in our group on the internet, I didn't even know they had these terms.
Being the nerd that I am, there actually is a book, believe it or not, that breaks it down, and then after a while, you're parsing this too much. Even the person who wrote it is very smart and stuff like that. And I think, I can't think of the name of the book. This is the book that so many people are alluding to, because the guy who wrote it, he spent a lot of time and he goes into great detail of saying atheist, Gnostic, and it's.
But humanistic is best because it kind of defines you by the person you are,
Yeah.
not by what you believe in as a religion. It's your value system, whether you're a good person or a bad person, and kind of your fellow man or whatever.
Yeah.
Again, some people, it's important to them. For me, like when I formed my group, I took careful thought of placing Haitian free as a free by itself in thinkers, because when I'm speaking in front of a crowd or a few new friends, I can explain why, and there's a purpose behind those words, because I'm a poet as well.
Right.
So I recognize the power of words, and but yes, to some people it's more important than others. To others, it's whatever. But for those,
do you find, or did you ever tinker with the name? The reason I'm asking is because when I came with Black Non-Believers, not because I was a great novel and creative, because like I said, I knew about Mario Mendoza and the rest, and Felicia of Black Non-Believers Inc., which used to be Black Non-Believers of Atlanta. And I said, I'm using that. But I'm wondering if I were to use atheist, or I might get more hits, or it might come up more prominently in a Google search. I'm wondering about that.
yes, because I'm one of two per Google search Haitian-based secular groups that I know. The other one is in Haiti. I just found them. We're trying to get some things together so we can help them, because they're behind enemy lines big time.
Oh, wow.
And so those brothers.
And this is in Haiti.
This
that's
is
gonna
in
be
Haiti.
hard.
I bet that's incredibly hard.
That's incredibly hard. So, yes, the words do, and you have to think about that when you advertise. You have to kind of cater to the audience, and cater to the prejudices, cater to the stereotypes. if you wanna reach a certain popularity level.
Yeah,
Well, what I
give
did-
out, give out free food or something.
Yeah, that's another thing too. We don't have the money for that, but, I mean, I did think about that, 'cause I was like, would I be more successful in terms of attracting people if I use, but what I did, I tried what meetup.com allows you to do, it allows you to use these like, keywords, but I put atheist as a keyword, but I left non-believers, because I thought that would get the biggest swath, you
Yeah.
know, what they did. We shall see.
We shall see.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I enjoyed this interview conversation, and once again, I thank you for inviting me. And, you know, we did have some folks show up.
Yeah, that's
So-
good. We thank
So, and recording will give both of us a lot of, some ammo that we need to do some
Yeah.
further work in the future, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did, I mentioned you, I can't even think, there's one site called, what's it called? Oh, gosh, Atheist Party of Florida, whatever. What they were doing, they were actually, and I have to commend them for this, but they were coming up with a list of all the groups in Florida. And I don't know how comprehensive it is, but I did mention you because it was a pretty long list. So I don't know if you want to think about that. 'Cause they were putting together a compiling list of all, and Florida had, I didn't even know there were that many groups. It was a huge list. Like Florida, there was just like all in the different regions. This quite this long.
I'm definitely interested in seeing
So I'll
that
send you
list.
that information. Make sure you remind me.
Okay, I will. So, like I said, I'll get this to you as soon as
Alright.
possible, and had a good time, and I appreciate everything.
All right. Thanks for showing up.
Okay, no problem.